Looks like we're going to get started here. I put a couple graphics in the events discussion channel. We'll talk a little bit about them later on as we get into the session tonight. Tonight's going to be broken down into two distinct areas. One will be focused on the whole Examiner shipping, you know, ideas about priorities and blah, 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 all that stuff. And then we'll get into talking about some stuff that's really important, which is the storage partner programs and the MSPs and all the wonderful stuff that we plan to do in terms of actually getting out there and selling the products and selling the storage. So to get it started here on the Examiner stuff, just a couple quick notes. If you have an order in right now, we've added a couple of things to our statusing. First of all, an email went out to uh, several hundred people who are in that ordering process with some very clear understandings about, where we are and what's going on and how you can check where your status is and all of that sort of stuff. Um, we did add to the order tracking link, and you can check the announcements channel for this, but we did add to the order tracking link. Hang on a quick second. I guess I should ask this every night. You can hear me, right? Somebody type in there. Thank you. I still have to take care of you also, so I will. Anyway, coming back to what I was saying on the order status situation in the announcements channel, there's a link to it, and you can also link to the email that we sent out and so forth. And people are going to be probably mixed in terms of what they see and when they get that email status and so forth, and it just is what it is. We worked really hard through January to put out as many systems as we could. It's been a really rough process in sourcing the components that we need for these things. I think we're in okay shape now, but getting all that stuff brought over in the supply chain world that we're in these days has been tough. And then, found an integrator to take over because it was going to kill me to build, 1100 of these things. So that wasn't happening. And just not to toot my own horn, but in case you don't understand or know this, the 200 odd units that have been built and put into the field so far have all been built in my basement by me. So, I mean, that's my background. I've built custom computers for various kinds of industries for a long time, but I haven't personally built the computers for a lot of years. And so this has been an adventure the last 6 months. And I, obviously have a full-time job here doing the rest of this. So, um, finding an integrator to take over for us and actually ramp up the production was a big thing. But, when you start looking at integrators and people that can do this kind of work for you, there's a lot of questions you have to answer. There's some, liabilities and some other things that come along the way. Then once it's all said and done, you have to come up with a legal agreement. And we went through all those processes and we're pretty well in good shape now. They've built out a test unit. They're in the process right now of loading up the Clonezillas so that they can actually start, dropping. And, it's just going to be the case now that they're going to be able to really crank up the output on those. And so we'll get through those orders and they'll show up at the customers. And look, at the end of the day, I know there's a lot of impatience right now and it just doesn't really make any sense to me, but it is the case. But at the end of the day, they're going to be fine because they're going to show up at exactly the right time, right? They're going to be coming on the network in advance of all of our excitement this year, and there's going to be a lot of announcements on April 23rd. By the way, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to be bringing to the table that people will be very interested and excited about. Most of them I can't tell you right now, otherwise they wouldn't be really exciting announcements, right? So, that'll happen, and the people that get their miners before then are going to be, more than adequately taken care of, and they will be perfectly placed for the year to come. Now, that leads into this whole thing about priority over DIY and the whole, sort of pushback that we're getting. And of course, it's not like we don't know that this is coming. It's not like, we don't sort of anticipate it. When we push the pies off the board, at the end of the day, we knew that there was going to be a lot, of sturm and drang inside the Discord and out on Twitter and in places like that. But you know what? You guys didn't build this project. As much as you want to say DIY built the network or built whatever, you didn't build the project. I don't remember seeing you back in October of 2018. And worse, I don't remember seeing you in 2019 when things were getting really lean for us. And, we didn't really have a lot of good prospects. All it really was at that point was just a pipe dream for us, and we had kept our heads down and kept grinding. So, when people say DIY built the project, I say, no, we built the project. And at the end of the day, DIY actually represents to us those original community folks, right? The guys that were here with us back then, that stuck with us from the beginning and they're still there and didn't churn and didn't leave. Those guys actually are the ones who, stood up the units on the network that really mattered. The people that showed up after listening to YouTube videos, I mean, great. I'm glad you're here and I hope you stick around for years. And I hope, we're looking back in hindsight and saying the same things about you. But at the end of the day, you know, just kind of shut the fuck up. I mean, at this point, if you're, going to start drawing conclusions about what's fair and what's not fair. Because look, everything that we've ever done in this project has been to take care of people. We've never done anything that's been, not right for the project and the people that really truly support it. The people that show up and just look to extract and run. Yeah, we don't take care of those people. In fact, we kick them in the butt and they go, but at the end of the day, the people that really are here to do the right things, man, we just have a history of just doing right by people. So, you know, eh, all I can say is just stick around and you're going to see how it's going to play out. So, what does it mean when we say that? Well, we don't know exactly what it means when we say that EXA miners are going to get priority because it can mean an awful lot of things. And so, I'm going to tell you about some of those things that it can mean right now so that you can get an idea. Because if you're kind of just, sitting there saying things like, oh, well, they just need him because they want to, get all this extra money and do whatever, go to Belize and hang out on the beach or whatever, you're not really paying attention. The examiners have a lot of capabilities for us. So, you know, we can do a lot of things for them that make them a preferred provider. And in some ways, it wouldn't even really impact DIY. Like, for instance, we could just give them more incentives, right? We could just leave the DIYers at the same level of incentives right now and say, okay, this is what you're going to get going forward or whatever. But then we could say, but we really like those examiners, so we're going to give them a little bit more, and that's probably going to happen. We can prefer them in the relay or host sets, right? We can go out there and we can, build into our host set strategy that examiners make up some percentage all the way up from 0 to 100. And, in some cases, we may do that. There may be a case where we offer it to the customer and say, well, look, you can have, a kind of a, really broad spectrum of provider capabilities across the board, primarily based on, the metrics and the KPIs that we were able to pull together, or you can have a very homogeneous and consistent network that we actually have worked with partners and built ourselves, and you make that choice. And I guarantee you a lot of customers are going to choose that second one over the first, even if the performance metrics say that you're better. Right? Because that's just how people are. And so, that's a deal. We can provide them with custom versions of our software, right? We can leave SPD out there for the DIY and we can have it at 1.6 and we can do 1.6.4, and 1.6.4 maybe has some capabilities built into it that we just don't ever give to the open source world. And why would we do that? Well, the examiners are funding that development. They're paying for it, right? So since they're paying the freight, There's no reason why we wouldn't go in there and actually provide extra capabilities. We can also do some interesting things though now, and bear with me on this. And here's what I hope you're going to take from this, by the way. I hope every one of you, as a DIY installation, decides to buy at least one Examiner. And then if you do that, then I guarantee along the way, you are going to get taken care of in all the ways that you want and need to be taken care of. We can do things like we can build in compliance regime auditability. We had a guy last week that showed up, and his whole notion was, well, I once worked in M&E, and NAB is the worst place for you to do your launch, and blah blah blah. And we kind of like we're calling him out, asking him, why do you say that? What do you mean? And he says, well, there's an auditing agency out there, and they're never gonna accept your garbage network, and they're never gonna let Legends of the Fall be on your network, and all this other sort of stuff. And, when I went to the site, I kind of knew what I was going to find. They have an auditing statement. They're an auditing group. They're a group that essentially validates and checks out the capabilities of the cloud storage provider or other service providers. It's not just cloud storage, but we fall into that category. And so the deal is that imagine how that's going to work, because that's just one industry. I mean, almost every major industry segment in the world has some sort of regulatory bureaus, have some sort of, trade groups, has all kinds of different, requirements and goals and things that they need to do to meet their customer needs. And ultimately, what ends up happening is they're all going to end up presenting us with some form of compliance regime, right? And now this is where it gets really awesome. And, here you guys are going to want to try and participate as hard as you can, because what's going to end up happening in these kinds of situations. So we talked about this, and we said, well, so, Wasabi's out there. They've screwed together a whole bunch of these mid-tier data centers, a couple of industry vets. They pulled down a lot of Silicon Valley money. So they got all this, essentially loss leader capability. So they're pricing 80% below Amazon, $6 a terabyte. And so that's kind of where we got to baseline ourselves. When you really look into them, though, they actually, in their fine print, if you really dive in and start using the service, it's going to push you a little bit higher than that. You're going to be $8 to $10 when it's all said and done. And, there just isn't such a thing as undercutting Amazon by 80%. There is some possibilities for doing like glacier frozen type capabilities, but then you're not undercutting Amazon by 80% because Amazon's pretty cheap on glacier frozen. So that's where we set the bar. We said, might have to start out around $6, somewhere in that neighborhood. But the truth of the matter is, our network is going to be really strong and really performant and really capable and really available in regions where everybody else isn't. So, we aren't going to have to settle for being the lowest price network on the planet. I've never run a company where I've said I want to be the bottom price feeder company. I've never done that. I've always been in environments where we were always a premier product, where we always delivered something that was above and beyond, because why wouldn't you want to be there? I mean, look, you can disintermediate big players like AWS on price, there's no doubt about it, but people aren't going to stay just for the price. If the service isn't there, then it doesn't matter. So in the beginning, we probably will have to give away a lot of free services, no doubt about it. But over time, I think we're going to be able to offer something that's somewhere in the middle between where Wasabi is baselining and where Amazon ultimately ends up being, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 to $50 for most customers. So look, I tell you, you got to be $3 and then so we can make 50%, but that's not really true. That's not going to be the way it's going to end up. And these compliance regimes are exactly why, right? So one of the things will come along, with these compliance regimes, and we'll say, well, we've got to do some, auditability capability. And if we do that, right, if we provide auditability to the satisfaction of whatever group is in charge of that, and a lot of times it's, it's a mix and match of formalized testing and maybe some schmoozing and some stuff like that, but at the end of the day, if you can pass, then you can ultimately deliver data to those specific groups. And if you can pass those audits and deliver data, you can charge a little bit more money. And that's how you can kind of climb that ladder and get up the scale. And if you do that, then of course, we're going to pass that through to you guys in terms of, what we're willing to pay for those kinds of tiers. But now think about it. You're out there building everything under the sun, right? You're finding hard drives everywhere. You're building, racks, you're building, pies, you're building everything, and not saying you're not doing a great job, but you're building all kinds of stuff. With the Examiner, we have essentially one single platform that we know inside and out, right? And if it turns out that we have to build in an auditability to it, we can just write it into our OS and our code and then hand over one of the units to the auditors and say, look, there are 18,000 of these things on the network, and we guarantee all your data is going to be on these. Please pass this through your audit compliance regime, and we'll go ahead and get started. See how easy that is? Examiners are going to make more money than you. They just are. So if you don't have an order in, you should try and get on that wait list and make sure you do it. All those YouTube video guys are right. They are absolutely right. There's not one thing that they said that's wrong except for the time frame, right? They just essentially told you a bad time frame, because ultimately everything that they said is going to pan out to be true. And we didn't even pay them to do it, right? So that's another one. Built-in staking capability. This network is going to go to proof of stake at some point, right? Right now we've got huge consensus hash rate. Okay. We were terrified that our network was going to be a 51 victim somewhere down the line. Still could. Basically whenever you're, the only one on your algo, or one of 2 or 3 on your algo, and ASICs are out there by the thousands, and they're used, and they can be had, and China owns a whole bunch of them and so forth. That risk exists. I mean, Ethereum Classic has been attacked multiple times on their GPU mining, platform, and the only reason that they've managed to sort of survive is the coin doesn't really do anything, and Barry Silbert backs it. So of course they're going to stick around and be fine and not take any kind of a hit. We, on the other hand, if we got 51, would probably have to face an existential sort of trial, right? We'd be in a real tough shape. So the good news for us is, with a hash rate increasing the way it's increased over the last 6 months, that kind of has dissipated. We're still very much, keeping a hawk eye on the blockchain and so forth. But at the end of the day, the need to move to proof of stake rapidly has kind of slowed down a little bit. We're still going to do it. And the deal is with proof of stake is that we have a staking token that goes on our network, and it's in existence today. It's called SPF. It doesn't stake today. It actually is just a taxing token today and on every transaction on the network. But going forward, it will become the coin that will be the staking token. So why wouldn't we go ahead and build into the Examiner some sort of stake mining capability so that it also handles proof of stake? Examiners are going to make more than you. They just are. And so then we can do built-in relayer capability. Right now, you guys probably don't know an awful lot about the relayer, but there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes with people trialing the relayer, and we're taking their feedback. And one of the reasons the J18 didn't turn out to be the big, bang that some thought it might be is because when we started provisioning the relayer to people that had never seen it before, we realized it was tough. It was still a little rugged. It was still a little hard to kind of use and put into place. So we pulled it back. We started talking about how we really need to kind of, release this thing and get it out into the wild. We talked at length about some things we needed to do, from KPIs off the relayer, to understand exactly how far we could push it, and by extension where it actually would end up living. And so we've made a lot of progress there, and our guys are doing some really great things. And so when we get into the partner section, I'm going to invite a bunch of people up, because I know you're all sick of listening to me week in and week out. So we'll listen to some other people, and a lot of it will be focused on this relayer capability that we're really, 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 really excited about right now, and having a great time with. We are doing some testing right now on, like AWS and Oracle and some of the bigger cloud services, just to try and get an idea of how far we can push a relayer, and how much throughput we can push through it. And some of the results we're getting back right now are just incredible. So the good news about the examiner is we could split an examiner in two. And on one side, it can be an examiner, and on the other side, it can be a exa relayer, right? So that's a thing, and it can actually become that. We can use examiners to do a sort of built-in snowball capability, right? So when we get into the partner discussion later on here, about 9 minutes, the deal is we're going to talk a little bit about distribution. And one of the things is, and we have a partner over in Denmark that has just a copious amount of customers that they service. I think it's something like 7 or 8 countries that they rep over there, and they do a good job with. And they do Nutanix, and they do a whole bunch of different Office 365. They do just a bunch of integrations and so forth. And one of the things that they're really interested and excited about, and have offered up a lot of testing capability to us, is hosting just hundreds or thousands of these relayers, and then just making it a single URL swap for their customers, right? So the customer doesn't have to stand up one of these relayers, doesn't have to manage it, doesn't have to monitor it, doesn't have to do anything. But here's the problem. You're up at the top of Sweden, and you have to put the data down into Denmark, into the relayer center. That's one hop. And then you've got to turn around and take that data, and you've got to shard it, encrypt it, and send it out to the distributed network that they're going to be using, the host set that they choose. And that's a second hop. And of course, it's a manifold hop that's going out to multiple devices. So, there's going to be a lot of bandwidth costs there. And, if it's a lot of terabytes of data or even petabytes of data, what'll end up happening is not just bandwidth costs, but time. Just the amount of time it's going to take to actually get the stuff uploaded and encrypted and put out onto the network. So what ends up happening is, we hand them one of these devices. We call it a snowball. We don't call it that. That's what Amazon calls theirs. But it's a device that gets put out onto the client site with a 10G network card or some kind of a high-speed network card in it. And then ultimately what they do is they connect it directly into their network, and they upload all their data onto it. And then they hand that device over to the relayer center. And then the relayer center guys plug it in, upload it all into the relayers, and then they only end up with one hop. So that's another purpose-built functionality for that device that can actually be used. That's just scratches the surface. I can just keep coming up with them. I can come up with at least 9 or 10 more ways in which that platform is going to serve us extremely well over time. Now, what you're kind of angry about, if you're angry, I mean, I don't think most of you actually are angry, but I think there are a few of you out there that are. But the deal is that you kind of look at where the money's going off these things and say, well, we don't really get to see it, and it's going all to you guys, and we don't know what you're doing with it, and it's like crypto's such a rug pull and all this other stuff, and it's like, and I'm just telling you flat out, it's funding our development, it's paying coders, and that's really what it is. And we'll go out and we'll hire more coders. It's going to pay for marketing and advertising. It's going to pay for a lot of different kinds of things to grow and build the network capability. But we also understand that that's an area that people, rightfully might want to share in and have the capability and abilities to provide some value add. So, like Helium, and I should just say this probably because I don't think I've actually said this too vividly in the forums, but we did kind of do a pivot last year, by the way, in a mindset pivot more than anything. And in that when we finally started looking at Helium, and I think when I first started looking at it, they had, I don't know, it must have been something like 40,000 nodes or something like that. I didn't find out about them really. I heard about them early on. I heard about them way back when, but wasn't paying any attention. I didn't start paying attention until they were somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40,000 nodes or something like. And then when they got to 40,000, it was like every other day they were like 50. Then they were like 70. It was just like that crazy, crazy growth curve that they got on. Now they're 540,000 nodes. And I guess there's a lot of pain over there, and it is what it is. I'm sure they're working through it, and I'm sure ultimately they're going to work through it fine and deliver this network that they've built, which is awesome. And that's the network that we want to build. We want to have that same 500,000 nodes or better, and maybe even a lot more than that when it's all said and done. So I kind of, told everybody in our sort of group, I said, look, we're not going to reinvent this wheel. We're going to follow these guys. I mean, we're going to mirror a lot of what they've done. And, this miner thing is one of them. And so what they don't have is they don't have a DIY miner. They don't have the ability for you to build your own hotspot like you can do here. And ultimately, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but I'm saying it could happen. And you just need to be aware of it. We might ultimately come to a place down the road where things are so lopsided that we just say that's it. We're just not going to leave the DIY out there in open source. They can keep using it at version 1.6 or 1.7 or whatever it's on, and they'll still get whatever data they're going to get, but we just won't release any new versions for them. So understand, I know exactly what I'm doing here right now, by the way. There's 2,800 hosts on the network. There were 350 less than 5 months ago. What I'm doing is limiting that number. And I've said this over and over again that I'm doing this. And some of you are getting a little bit pissed about it because the coin price is mirroring it. And, in general, people are sort of starting to, get a little gruff and say, why are we doing this? Why are we limiting? Why are we kind of knocking it back? Does, is Ken just really angry all the time? And, it's like, no, actually, I'm laughing most of the day. But the problem is that we were not ready for 10,000 nodes on the network. We just weren't. And so now that we've had a chance to see what it looks like coming up the ladder, we're now also starting to see the horizon and what it looks like beyond. And when we start to ramp up the growth again, it's not going to be able to happen in the way that it happened in this, previous go round. So one of those things is we'll probably license the software, right? We'll probably get some folks out there that are good at building things, and we'll say, look, if you want to license software, you have to kind of go through this, regime that we build for you to train you how to build them, to manage the software, to do support, all that stuff. And if you meet all those qualifications, then you can license the software and become a reseller and become, an integration or an integrator partner for us. And I think that's going to be a big thing, by the way. I think that will ultimately be a huge thing because, us building here in the United States and shipping to China is not really a thing. Or shipping, even to Europe is not really a cost-effective sort of strategy. So we know we're going to have to balloon that out, and we will. And so we'll share that wealth with a lot of folks. At some point, the actual data storage will start to take over on revenues, and we will be able to fund ourselves that way. And we won't need the same amount of funding from the actual Examiner revenues, so we'll be able to turn that around. Okay, so that's kind of the deal there, and I just wanted to go through all that. Again, I'm not making any kind of earth-shattering breaking announcement here. I'm not telling you exactly how much more you're going to make as an Examiner customer. I'm not telling you tomorrow DIYs are going to be shut off. Some of you are going to run with scissors and say those two things, but that's okay. I've come to understand that. But at the end of the day, you just need to know that that's really the direction of the project. And look, it's a permissionless network. And so I'm going to say this again, and at some point somebody's going to understand what I'm saying here, and you will see this happen. And it's fine. It's literally fine. We don't care. It's fine. The idea here is that somebody can grab the open source software, hire their own coders, and write their own clients, right? And they can start uploading data to the network. And you could do this. You could go out there and round up 18 programmers and build a layer 2 on top of the network and say, well, we'll just do our own thing. And we won't, we'll go the opposite direction. We'll make our network all pie and we'll just exclude all the examiners. Okay. And we'd have a great relationship then going forward because you would handle your side of the network, we'd handle ours, and life would be great. And where we're going to make that rubber hit the road is that we're going to say that people who choose to accept data from other uh, applications, other tools, other open source renters, or whatever, well, that's great. I mean, fine, but we just won't incentivize them. We have a way of identifying our own contracts, and we'll say we're only going to incentivize our own contracts. So if you're accepting that other data, we're probably going to exclude you from our host sets. And why is that? Well, because we just can't guarantee that you're not putting that crazy pedophilia online. And, we just don't like that stuff. And yeah, I know there's a lot of crypto people that think that the world would be a lot better with a lot of pedophilia online, but at the end of the day, it's not us. So, if you're going to accept open source stuff, we're probably going to exclude you from the puzzle. And it just is what it is. And that's always been our stance, by the way. It's not like some new thing. It's not evolution, then revolution has always been our thing. We believe that, we're not trying to solve freedom. We're trying to solve a business puzzle or a business problem. All right. So that's it. I preached a lot there, and I know that those are probably starting to chafe a lot with people, and it's okay. We're gonna get through this period. I think actually two things are really true right now, and I think you're all are gonna see this pretty soon, and the whole sort of um, mood is going to start to change just simply because of it. I think two things are true. One, which is sort of like completely out of the blue, is I'm pretty sure COVID is ending. And there's a lot of people that don't necessarily believe that, or a lot of people that actually didn't ever believe it was real, whatever. But it's clearly ending at this point. We've hit kind of a peak on this last sort of not really serious variant, and it's starting to come down. CES was kind of a mess this year in Las Vegas. Maybe half the attendance that they normally get. NAB 4 months later typically get about 90,000 people there. If we get 45, I guess we'll feel that that's about the same as what they did. I'm hoping that they are able to pull in 60, 70,000. I've been terrified to leave the house for the last 2 years because I'm just old and frail and, weak and sick. So, I didn't want to go out and die. So, now I'm really anxious to get out there. I'm willing to get on an aircraft. I'm willing to do it all. And I think we're in that place. That's a big thing. And this year is going to prove out for us, I think, in a big way because of that. The other thing that is going to start to happen is these relayer installations are going to start taking shape. And that's going to ramp really quickly because now that we've got some performance metrics behind them, now that we've got an understanding about how to best deliver them and where they fit best, we're going to be able to really start slamming these things out there. So I think what'll happen is you'll see this kind of ramp up into A23. So that A23 isn't going to be like a switch. It's not going to be like you know, lights are off until April and then they go on. It's going to be like you're going to start to see this growth right into April. And then we announce and launch the product for real live, in Las Vegas. And at that point, I think you all will have a lot of data on your network already, and we're all going to be in a much better place. And then we'll start to see the network dribbling back in with growth, and it'll be that kind of slow growth again that we really kind of rather enjoy. And then somebody will say something stupid, and we'll get another 10,000 people show up or whatever. But for the next period of time, I think we're all going to get back into a much more comfortable place that will service us all much better. All right, so let's move on to the storage partner sort of section. I'm going to call a few people up to the stage. Let me find them in the audience here. And if I invite you to speak, by the way, here, you can't say no. So let me see. Where's my last guy here? Oh, there he is. Mark, you got to come up to the stage. Well, all right. While he's trying to figure out how to come up to the stage, we'll go ahead and begin the conversation. This is going to be really loose. I've got a number of things that I want to kind of cover, and I want to really let these guys expound on the various areas that they're in and let them kind of chat with you. But it's not a real formalized presentation, and
Hey, shh. I need you guys to be quiet, please.
yeah, that's a good thing. And so in the first of all, back in the events discussion channel, I did put a couple of graphics in there. One is the graphic that we essentially live by, but I haven't had a chance to actually talk about it really much lately because we haven't been in any kind of fundraising mode. And I always use it as a fundraising graphic, but I think you ought to look at it because I used to show it to everybody all the time. And so it might be the case that you've never really seen this graphic for any kind of, real serious, sort of look. And this graphic is the global data creation that's put together. And if you look at where we are right now, 50 of total data creation. And if you look at that chart, they've extrapolated it out to this place where we get to 2030 and 2035, where the
That's fine.
global data creation is just insane. And, in that kind of environment, everybody wins. It's not a, zero sum game. Amazon doesn't just win. We don't just win. Everybody wins. The people with the better solutions win a lot harder. So I think you really ought to study that because I think it really informs this whole conversation because I think you're all coming from a zero sum mentality. And I think you need to lose it and start figuring out how you can just get your piece of that big giant bar chart that's coming along. The second graphic is actually a pretty cool graphic that I'm giving you kind of a sneak preview of right now. So we have an investor that we picked up sort of in the, I guess, the middle part of last year, who does some really excellent work for this kind of stuff, graphics creation and communications and so forth. And we asked him to put together a document that kind of showed how this whole, exanet services thing works, right? How the customer accesses it through tools like VM and Commvault, Acronis, or whatever. Then that comes in and hits the relayer, which has the S3 compatible layer on top of it. We've got a billing layer in there, and then that middle section, which looks really cool, is sort of where all the magic happens in the cache with the compression, the encryption, everything before the data gets sharded and sent off to you guys. And of course, in this picture, you guys are all just that one rack mount, and then there's the three examiners. So even here, I've kind of like overwhelmed you a little bit with that message. But this is a pretty good understanding of what it all looks like in terms of how the customer actually ends up accessing the network going forward. And if you haven't really heard that message or understood what the relayer looks like, this is a pretty good representation that kind of shows you what the stack looks like and so forth. So the interesting thing about the relayer, and I'll bring in, I think I'm going to start with Chaz on this one. So the interesting thing about the relayer is, and I wake up sometimes and just think about this kind of stuff. So a year ago, literally a year ago, we had a working proof of concept. And at that point in time, we were talking about launching MVP. And I just kind of decided, no, that we shouldn't do that, because our core engineering was telling us, look, we need some more time to do this, that, and the other thing. We had some performance issues we needed to put together, but it worked pretty good. I mean, it actually worked pretty good. And if you followed any of our online stuff back then, Chaz, who's also an investor in our corp, um, was actually helping us do some demos because he's CTO at a corporation. He does backup stuff and specifies, and they use VM. And so he was using VM on our network. And, he was pretty psyched up about it. He was like, well, fuck, why wouldn't I use this over Amazon? I mean, this thing's great. It's going great. Well, here's the best part about this, and we'll talk with our IT people a little bit here in a minute as well. But we've actually tuned that thing to be night and day, even from where it was last January. And now the thing is really, really cooking, and we've got a lot more tied into it. So, Chaz, welcome to the meetup, and why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience over the last year, and a little bit about what you've been throwing at the tool, and sort of how you've seen the process of development, and just riff a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it. And Ken's 100% correct. I mean, a year ago, he's like, download this, put it on your thing, and see if it works. And he's right. A year ago, it worked, and I could connect to it, I could create a bucket, and I could send data to it, and it would trickle up, and the throughput was at that point. I think we were more excited that it worked, and then we kind of got into, okay, it works, needs to get faster. And Ken said, all right, try this version. Got a little faster. He said, all right, try this version. Got a little faster. So every time I got a new version, it got a little faster, which is fantastic. And, quickly, because we've got a lot to go on here, fast forward, I have an instance standing up right now while this call is going on that I am throwing 1,200 connections at it right now. It's sitting in Oracle OCI. It's 12 vCPUs, 32 gigs of RAM, running Oracle Linux, running Docker, running the latest version out of the oven from these guys. And I'm literally crushing data through it, and been doing it for 3 hours here. So, I mean, we went from single digits, and I called Ken and I said, well, it took 14 hours to send up this little batch I had. It worked. It's done. I didn't have any errors, but I think we got to get it a little faster. And at that point, now I'm throwing 1.5 terabytes of data through this in a handful of hours. So, he's underplaying how much these guys have changed the way that this product works and how performant it is now compared to what it is then. Because, I mean, to throw 1,200 connections at the same time at a virtual machine running this technology is just ridiculous. So, again, Ken, hats off. We've come, leaps and bounds in the last year with you and your team developing this product. And, I was excited as I was then, even more now, because now it's faster. Because one of the things that Ken wanted to do a year ago was, okay, Chaz, go get an account at Amazon. How fast is Amazon? And we spent the last year trying to kick the bag out of Amazon from a performance standpoint, and now we're just crushing it. So, not only will this product come out cheaper than Amazon, but this product outperforms Amazon as well. And that's a big difference from, 12 months ago. Back to you, Ken.
And what is the maintenance to you feel like, because you're doing an on-prem version and you're coming from a Windows side, so how has that been, and how do you see people looking at it? If you go out there as a storage partner and you sell somebody on picking up a relayer and putting it in their installation, what kind of maintenance and what kind of ongoing sort of hand holding do you foresee that they're going to have to do to run one of these things internally?
Yeah, I'm playing with it as long as I have. I had the pleasure of not only doing the Windows version, but now I'm also running the Linux version. The Windows version installs pretty quickly. It's all self-contained. It's not, I mean, it literally installs in 10 minutes. You now can configure the options in the settings GUI, restart it again, add the disk you want. So usability and user friendliness is very straightforward. Linux is, a Docker version, and, you configuring an environmental file, which is very easy to do. So either side's not hard. I don't find that the product's hard to use. It pops up in a little GUI, you start the services, and you're off and running, and you're pointing, in my case, Veeam at it, and having it be the scale out backup repository for Veeam after my initial on-prem backup. But yeah, it works really well, and I'm running it on a pretty large server, but I'm also running 19 VMs on that server and the Veeam backup technology. So the server's taking a pretty heavy load when it's running. This instance at Oracle OCI that I was talking about earlier in the call is the first time I've left Veeam on one side of the fence and had a relayer on a completely separate environment, from a connectivity standpoint. And now I'm seeing separating the two. So not having 19 VMs on the server, not having Veeam on the server, not having the relayer on the server, and separating those resources out, the performance has gone way up. So, certainly if we're talking best practice over the last year, I can certainly tell you having the relayer spinning away on its own and not having it on the same place where you're trying to do backups or serve up a bunch of VMs is absolutely the way you want to go. But other than that, the log files are readable, they're basic. There's no real secret sauce as far as management goes. You just install it, run it, configure it, and turn it on. So that part's been very straightforward.
How would you feel about, so, everything's virtualized these days, and it's almost to an extreme, but in this case, the way the relayer stack lays out is there's essentially several components. The real thing that we put all the time and energy into over the last year is this module called Host.io, which I always laugh about because our architect, when he showed up, he said, I can knock out Host.io myself in about a week, so I'll just code it up. And it's ultimately turned into this really large architecture thing that is really it's the core IP of our whole thing at this point. And they put so much work into it. So Host.io is that engine that really drives everything. All the stuff that, like, contracting is tied into it, the streaming and everything. Then we have this whole caching layer that's built into it. And then we have the metadata database, which is really, really important. And the problem with the metadata database, we've talked a little bit about, and in future sessions, we'll really kind of talk a little bit more about it. But at the end of the day, this virtualization schema and everything, and really managing it as an entity could turn out to be too much for certain kinds of people. What if we could drop in a 1U rack mount with 4 drives in it, and it already had the cache built in, already had the sort of the databasing with snapshotting built in, had everything really set up so an administrator could just sort of turn it on, run a script, and be up and running on a relayer? Would that be something you think MSPs would be interested in being out there selling and representing to customers?
100%. Absolutely. I mean, I've been in technology for over 25 years, so tweaking all this stuff and turning it on and flipping all the levers and dials, it's, second nature for me. But having that same thing as the Examiner, I own a couple of them, and it's plug it in, turn it on, plug in an Ethernet cable, and open a few ports. That level of simplicity absolutely plays, especially when you're the MSP guy or you're the data center guy or you're at your corporate office and you want to slide a 1U in and not worry about, am I backing up Postgres? Do I have the dumps right? Like all the stuff that we worry about now, that's a home run. Absolutely. I think that's a huge home run. And I've been saying that for quite a while, that you got to give something to the data center guys who may or may not be a storage guy, but they're sitting on tons of bandwidth that don't get used at nighttime because the business shuts down. It's a perfect product for that nighttime bandwidth usage. Absolutely. It mirrors the backup company that I ran for 10 years, where we were playing off that, saying, oh, you don't really use your internet at nighttime, so why don't we do your backups over that? This is the same concept, because most people don't do backups during the day. They do backups when everyone's not in the office. And this is the same concept. Push them off to the relayer and off they go to the network. So yeah, huge idea. Love it.
Cool. And so that'll definitely be one of the platforms that we build. And one of the things that we're already focused on right now is putting together a subsidiary. We already have it essentially for this whole Examiner, Exa relayer, hardware configuration component system company that will be operating underneath us, and they will be essentially working hand in hand. One of the things that you actually also put together, and I'm going to bring in Mark on the next section on this, but what I'll say is that Chaz actually, along with one of our other investors, had built a successful data center infrastructure company, and then ultimately had a nice exit on it. And I'm not sure where that data center went, but I imagine part of it went into Wasabi, if my guess is right. But if not, one of the things that we were able to get is a whole set of sort of documentation and process that actually skewed to my background pretty good, because I've set up computer resellers and set up distribution and some of that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of contracts you have to put together, and there's a lot of, legalese that goes into it in order to actually resell through people and to do that right. And Chaz really helped us out because he has all of that stuff sort of in a template format that we've been able to just go ahead and pop into place. So the great news is I think we're going to hit Vegas immediately running, right? Where we're going to be able to just start onboarding reseller partners and not have to have a whole long sort of ramp up period. One of those is another one of our investors, which is Mark Maisman. And Mark is actually in a whole nother industry. And at this point, what he's doing is he's been in the process of purchasing out a MSP in Central Florida, I believe. And the deal is that he's got some really good ideas about where this MSP can go. And one of the ones that you brought to me first off, you talked about, you said you had a friend who ran ATM kiosks around the state, and you wondered about the possibility about dropping examiners down in the hollow part of an ATM network. Would that even be possible? And is it something that, could be sold off through to the customer and be affiliated and ultimately get an override off of, going forward? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you sort of have seen, Mark, in terms of what drew you through this storage partner understanding and how you kind of see our thing, showing up in that process?
Yeah, thanks for having me. As I started to get into the tech space and the managed services space and looking at recurring revenue streams and how to drive revenue, one of the things I looked at was data storage and hosting and how it's kind of a set it and forget it environment from a labor aspect, as opposed to your help desk of typical managed services, which is password recovery and everything up through your network architecture and cybersecurity and all those things. So I started looking at a lot of different things around the time that I came into this project, looking at the Examiner, and I wouldn't say it was in its infancy, but even since July of last year that I've been in the project, the ideas for the relayer and the plug and play abilities to place these things in different locations, it only plays upon the first idea that you mentioned, putting these things in locations where companies or individuals have uh, a repetitive amount of locations, whether it's a device, whether it's you and I talked about franchise locations for fast food restaurants, for different things like that. We thought from a managed service provider standpoint, and Chaz mentioned earlier the plug and play relayer that we could sell that as a storage backup device. But even before that, we were thinking about every client that we were to service from a managed service provider, we could potentially put an Examiner in their server room on their rack somewhere and keep replicating these nodes everywhere, giving the client some sort of a kickback or a discount on the services we offer them or something. But yeah, a way to extend our ability to sell cloud storage, B, leverage the ability to make profit on the network, and coming in as an investor, what I really loved about the project is as a managed service provider, I can see at least five, if not maybe now 6 or 7 different ways to make streams of revenue out of this project. So it's just, I'm all in on it. It's been amazing from day one.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you sort of highlight there that I want to sort of, extrapolate or abstract out to the rest of the community is that this is really, I think, an important understanding. So these guys both own multiple examiners, right? And their focus is actually on the other side of the equation, but they get it on this side, right? And so, you know, if you've come into the project and you're thinking, well, geez, I'm going to build one of these things and then maybe I'll set it all up in a basement or garage or whatever, and then I'll just keep adding to it and I'll just keep building up my thing. But what you really ought to do is broaden your horizons a little bit and start thinking, how can I get 100 of these things out there? How can I get these things scattered all over my city? And then I'll take an override on them, or I'll take all of it and then I'll give the people who, house them an override. We're going to be able to build the software in such a way that we can help you to actually do those kinds of things and take your cut off the top or take, all of the thing and give a cut off to somebody else and to do that sort of stuff. And then the second piece is this storage partner selling, where what we've kind of got set up right now in our current template is we've got sort of a 2-tier thing. And let me just pull up my little graphic so I don't say it wrong. But what I've actually called it is MSP and referral agent. There's actually a third potential entity that we've kind of kicked around calling a distributor, but I think they're going to probably still end up falling under the MSP rubric. But MSP and referral agent. So with an MSP, the whole idea is you go out and you actually deal directly with the end customer, and you essentially make the sale, and you do the configuration, consult, do all that sort of stuff, and then ultimately you take all the gravy off that sale. But referral agents are people that are going to be able to come along and say, well, look, I have these hosts on this distributed network. It's really powerful. You ought to talk to these guys over here and make this happen. Well, you make money, right? We'll throw you some scratch for actually being a referral partner and bringing people onto the network. And more importantly, we can set this thing up that if the companies are in your neck of the woods, we can have it make sure that you end up becoming one of the preferred, or if you have multiple nodes, preferred nodes on that customer data set. So not only do you get a little bit of an override from actually referring the entity to us, but you can actually then help populate the data on your specific instances, right? So that's a real powerful sort of partnering sort of understanding. So, great stuff there. So, last thing I want to kind of do is talk with our internal team guys a little bit, and just kind of get a sense or introduce them to you, really, for most reasons actually. But then I also do want to let Jay talk a little bit about some work that he's doing right now that we pulled together, and maybe even riff a little bit about what the last year has looked like. But first, I'm going to go ahead and go to Henry, who just joined our team. I haven't actually really announced him yet as a team member because we're still working on some administrative stuff, but he is a full member of the team at this point. If he sends me an invoice, actually, I'll actually pay him today, because today was the day I paid everybody else. But anyway, Henry, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for the intro.
Tell us how much you earned on your Examiner this month in your incentives.
Yeah, my X miner did pretty well. I've no idea how that happened. I got one last summer, kind of when they started going out, because I thought it was a good way to kind of contribute and support the project in a material way, other than just cheerleading in the Discord every day. And yeah, it's already doing really well. Got a couple hundred SCP in incentives. Have more data than most.
Was it a couple hundred? Come on, man. Was it a couple hundred?
Yeah, it was like 400, I think.
So a couple 400. Okay, yeah. So and we didn't, it wasn't like you were begging us to throw data on your machine, and it wasn't like I asked you to do anything special, right?
Yeah, if there is a way to prefer my unit, I sure don't know it. It was just yeah, having fast internet, good uptime, and yeah, just having a provider that can be a good foundation to host data on and be available.
This is what's going to happen to everybody in this room in another several months. So I know there's a lot of frustration right now, but you guys all need to understand how it works. And so stick around and you're going to get that opportunity. Henry's role with the team is going to be kind of manifold. We've got a lot of different ideas and directions. Originally we talked about bringing him on to be sort of an IT troubleshooter and working, side by side with Jay and our IT area. He recently graduated and a comp sci degree. So, but he's really interested in a lot of the, marketing and presentation and how the stuff actually gets delivered out to you folks and to the community and to the customers. So he's going to have a pretty broad role, and you're already seeing a lot of him in the support area. So here's your chance. When I go to Q&A here after this, you can ask him some questions or pat him on the back for helping you out or whatever. But anyway, thanks, Henry, for being here with us, and I'm sure we're going to have you on in future nights to talk a little bit more about the products and where we're going. Now I get to talk to my friend Jay, and so I want to introduce Jay in some ways because I think it's really valuable because I know a lot of people have talked to him directly, but you don't know much about him probably. Um, this whole thing started out in 2017, really, when we were all hanging out on the Saya Discord, and even though we all have tech backgrounds and we all have business backgrounds and product backgrounds or whatever, and storage related backgrounds, we all coalesced there because we were ship posting in a trading channel, and we seldom got out of our channel. We mostly just stayed in the trading channel and focused on trading Saya coin up and down and doing all of that sort of stuff. And there were three people that really coalesced together in that group, and they all are with us now. Jay actually was somebody who I got to know really good over there, and when this thing got kicked off the ground, I just felt like you've got some skills, you seem to be interested. Why don't you come and do this, and let's make this happen? And so I consider Jay one of my three co-founders, Jay and Pavel. Pavel's over in Russia, so he's not here right now. He's asleep. But the other guy actually is here too, and you know him as Jeff. Jeff, Jay, and I were sort of like these Deegan traders who just really kind of like kept David Vorick on his toes at all times, because for ship posting traders, we did focus a lot on the tech, and we did focus a lot on how the thing worked. We were you, by the way, all you people that are bitching at us and that are in the channels and giving and sniping and saying all kinds of stuff and challenging us and having us come and knock you back down. We were you. Right? Everything that you're doing is exactly what we did. So, when you look at this and you kind of say, is Ken angry, or is this stuff all going off the rails or whatever? You got to understand, you're not the first. And, we've got a little bit of history with this. Well, so Jay agreed to come along, and so we kind of got this thing off the ground. And, I'm going to say this, I kind of greedily sort of had this in the back of my mind because Jay worked as an IT guy at Peter Jackson's, tech arms in the film production world down there in New Zealand. And Peter Jackson's the guy that does Lord of the Rings. Avatar's being built down there. He did the Beatles thing just recently. Guy's a monster director. And I just kind of like was sort of like in the back of my mind saying, well, we're just going to use Jay at some point to get, Peter Jackson stuff. But ultimately what happened is Jay turned out to be a really talented engineer. And ultimately, without him, this thing would have never went anywhere. And, we really got off the ground because of the work he put in. So nice big build up, huh, Jay?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm deserving of some of that, but probably some others.
That cat, is that cat there with us right now? Because the cat likes to talk to us from time to time, right?
He's not here right now, but he's probably not far away, and he'll hear me talking, so he'll be along soon, I think.
Tell us how the genesis of the project kind of turned into where it is today, and just hit some of the high spots and low spots sort of how we kind of started this thing up and now how we're kind of viewing it as we get ready to launch this big product.
Sure. It's probably a pretty long story, but yeah, we kicked off really quickly. So we went from having the idea to having a working prototype in probably 10 days or so. And then I think we launched like 2 weeks later. It was so short. We really didn't know exactly what we were doing, I guess. We didn't know what it would become. We knew there was a little bit of hash rate that would join us. We had a few hosts on the first days. Some are still around, I think. But yeah, we got the blockchain up and running. We had a few hosts. People joined our community a little bit faster than joined being storage providers, I guess. And it took a really long time to even get up to 100 hosts. I think we were around 80 for a while and finally got over 100. And then, yeah, it kind of stayed between 100 and 300 for a couple of years. heaps of new people came in. Most of the providers that came online did actually stick around. There wasn't a lot of churn. People weren't earning much. I mean, they were earning a lot of SCP back then, I suppose, but it wasn't worth anything. So the people who were sticking around weren't doing it for the money. And of course, they were all DIY providers, as was everyone, I guess, until 6-7 months ago. But yeah, now we're here. Now we've got a product that kind of happened in the middle there, and then everyone turned up. Probably slightly sooner than we were expecting, but we're glad everyone's here. And now we're ready to get data out there.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the Examiner, but then I want you to dive into this testing you're doing right now, because it's really fascinating, and I think it's going to be really, really powerful. But one of the things that happened along the way is we started out, and actually it was quite some time ago. I think it was 2 years actually, or 18 months, where we started talking about developing this Examiner thing, because we saw that the network was not growing the way we needed it to grow, and it was not, we were providing a lot of coins to people. We were doing everything we could. We had contests. We had a thing called, King of Hosts, right? Where, people would earn a ton of coins, for having the most performant, the most durable, whatever, but we just weren't growing, and we couldn't really find a way to draw people in. So we said, well, look, we got to build this appliance thing. We've got to go get people that aren't techies. And we tasked a few sort of developers to perhaps help us with that. But I think the thing that really actually turned the tide on it was I asked you to write up a sort of a product spec on it. And you sat down and just wrote this document that just described it, both from the complete start to finish of how it needed to control the renter host protocol that underlies all of this stuff, as well as the product that it needed to be over top. And the interesting part about that is that it actually allowed two very middle of the road, well, in fact, one middle of the road and one shitty developer, to actually develop something that worked. I mean, it worked right out of the gate, even though these developers were not really all that good. So, quick pat on the back for that document you put together. But anybody who owns an Examiner, you're kind of beholden to Jay, because he's the guy that sort of dreamt up exactly what it needed to be. And now we're in the process of redoing all the code. We've just shipped some new updates and so forth, but it all sort of started with, an idea that Jay brought to the table. So, what was that like when you were writing up that document? I mean, did you feel like you understood enough of the SIA protocol that it really came pretty easy once you started writing it up?
I mean, it was the whole thing is more of a process, really. It's the software itself is relatively simple. I mean, it's a controller, a web UI, and then SPD, which is identical to what everyone else is using. But yeah, we realized that a lot of the support things that were stopping many people from becoming providers were kind of easy to fix, but easy for us to fix. So we kind of designed it around that, like what layers can we add over top of SPD that just takes away all this unnecessary trouble setting up or keeping it running or whatever. So just with that in the back of our minds, I suppose we wrote something that the outcome was going to be performant enough and stable enough. So yeah, it did. I mean, I had a pretty good idea in my head what it should look like when I started writing it. I think it came out mostly like that. I mean, we changed the processes for some things around a little bit, but it's yeah, it's good. It's good to see them out there and working, and they're becoming a good portion of our network. Well, very soon they'll be a significant portion of our network, but not just yet.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I think is really important in terms of cataloging history and so forth. So, we finally did get this thing launched in June of last year, and it was not gangbusters. I mean, we were delivering a few units a week and so forth, and all of our investor stakeholders bought one. I don't know if they bought them because they actually believed in them or whether they bought them just because they wanted to show their support for the project. They all recognize now what a great buy it was because they've all already ROI'd, and it's not even been 6 months, or 7 months. So they all kind of came in, and then we sold a number of others. But the thing that really was really valuable along the way is that they just worked, and they just really worked well. And what ended up happening was we had this video guy show up, and he started a new channel. He wasn't even a well-known influencer or anything like that. He had, like, I guess 15, 18,000 subs on his YouTube, and he was just kind of getting going, real down to earth, homespun kind of guy. And he just reviewed this thing, and he didn't even have one. he just said, this looks pretty cool. I'm going to dig into it. And he did something that I thought was really, really valuable. He actually researched it a little bit. He got in there and he actually did some homework on our project, so that he wasn't just sort of, repping something, to build a popular video. He really wanted to convey the information. And what ended up happening is this thing that we had built that, you were talking about, that had worked very well, suddenly got a whole bunch of interest because this individual had kind of posted it, and some 15,000 people saw that and said, well, yeah, this looks pretty cool. We want one. And so then he ended up going ahead and saying, well, look, if I get so many likes, I'll just buy one. And he did. And then, unbeknownst to him, I just decided, I said, well, you know what? I'm going to rebate the guy 100%. And it's not like I'm buying anything from him. He's not going to know it's coming. I'm just going to give him the money. And, we've never done that. We've never gone out there and paid anybody for anything like that. And so we didn't start here. He just came to the table and did a great job for us because he saw something that worked really well. And then things just went nuts. And none of us were ready for it because we just weren't ready. I can't even describe to you how we were not ready for it. And it went nuts. And as it started to go nuts, we started to realize how unprepared we were for it. And that's on us. I mean, look, we're not going to color that. All of the infrastructure that Jay had put together crumbled. But now he's got this ability to actually go out, because of the Examiner funding that we have, to actually put together real infrastructure. And so right now you're kind of doing some stuff with AWS and Oracle. I think you're going to be moving to and doing some testing. But tell us a little bit about this testing you're doing right now with relayers and what you're trying to actually see, and what are some of the real crazy highlights that you've seen so far?
Cool. So we picked AWS initially just because it ruled out a lot of the variables that we couldn't really account for in other places where we can run relayers, like either at home or other people's data centers or whatever. But anything else, AWS is super reliable. It's very measurable, so we know what we're getting. The tests that we run are very repeatable. We can tear down VMs, spin them back up on the same hardware, and we know we're going to get results that are valid with our previous ones. So we wanted to test a handful of variables that can be inputted into the relayer, which make up the data and parity pieces, and also the number of threads that are uploaded concurrently. We had a rough idea of how to get performance out of it. We don't still really know the sweet spot for particular hardware. So that's what we're trying to figure out at the moment, is given a piece of hardware or a certain throughput of internet connection, exactly what variables should we be using to get the best performance, or to get the most data out to the network, or the fastest performance from the client's application into the relayer, those kind of things. So we've been getting pretty good results. I mean, that's probably an understatement, really. It's better results the last few tests than we've ever seen before. And I think we can go higher. Like, we haven't found the ceiling yet. It seems like the more hardware resources we throw at the relayer, the faster it can go. And I don't know, I'm guessing I can say whatever, but I mean, we can peak 10 gig network connections pretty easily now. I don't expect there to be any issues getting double that with double the hardware. So that's kind of where we're looking at performance at the moment, with kind of upper end hardware, but nothing crazy, like 32 core, 64 gig of RAM. We can get rates of a few hundred gigs every 20 minutes out to the network. So it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, so this is
really
really
people
key.
haven't seen backups like this before.
And when you talk about, peaks at 10G and then even going beyond that, so like if you start multiplexing cards or just getting even crazy, insane custom cards together for bandwidth, what about sustaining? I mean, is it really just low bandwidth with some really high peaks, or are you actually seeing over an average the ability to really saturate a very big, network card like that?
So hold on, I've got the stats open here. So just while I've got it roughly in front of me. So for when we're seeing rates of around 10 gig, the actual average over the span of that is around 6 gig. So there's still room in there for optimization, is what I see in there. As that once we get rid of the peaks a little bit and flatten it out a little bit, we should be able to bring the average up along with the peaks. So it's still pretty good, and it leaves room for optimization. So we're already getting pretty amazing performance. It's better than what anyone can do to any other network. But I think with code we can make it better as well as with hardware. So we've got plenty of room still to improve it a lot further. And I think in 12 months we'll probably see maybe not the same performance gains as the last year, because it's like 50 times faster now than a year ago. I don't know if we'll be able to be capable of testing it 50 times faster again, but yeah, we've got room to grow for sure.
So these are crazy numbers, and what everybody needs to understand who's running a provider out there is what we're talking about here is we're talking about the ability for people and corporations to be able to push a lot of data up onto the network fast. And that's always been a limiter to people choosing to use the cloud, because if ultimately, it takes forever to upload stuff and you end up paying a lot for bandwidth and so forth, or it takes forever to download stuff. And by the way, this is bidirectional. The speed performance gains that we're getting on the uploads will be the same kinds of capabilities we'll be able to pull down on our downloads as well. So things like video, streaming, all the stuff that we're going to be focusing on beyond just archival, now all of a sudden the door has been slammed wide open for us, and we can go in and not just have to say, well, look, we're going to sell you something and it's going to be dirt cheap because it's just in somebody's basement. We're actually going to be able to go in and say, well, look, this thing blows this away and here it is, and show them the comparisons and really get in there with a performance oriented product, which I'm really super excited about. And ultimately where it benefits all you guys is you'll see that data pour in really rapidly once we start actually landing the customers. All right. These are just all starting to go longer, so I've just kind of thrown the hour out and recognized that they will. I'll go ahead and open it up to questions. You can target your questions at anybody up here on the panel right now that you want. Obviously be cool, but let me look and see who we have here for questions, and then we'll bring them up. Yopo. Got to come to the stage if you want to ask the question.
Just while we have a bit of dead air here, I will say that it's pretty sweet with testing that the conversation has kind of shifted from like how fast can your network run to instead us kind of flipping that back and saying, well, how fast can you run our network? Because really the ceiling is like we're still trying to find out where it is.
Hi there, guys. Sorry about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just I'm very new to the project. I love the things that I'm hearing, and the research that I've been doing to just peer-to-peer questions and things have Things are looking good. I did have a question though. With the machines like the 16 terabyte or 64 terabyte, is that like are you able to autonomize like the max storage space being used at one time, or is that over time?
Um, I'm not quite sure. I get the question. Are you asking if the entire space is going to be used up in sort of like one fell swoop, or does it
Yeah,
take?
like if you say like set it up and everything's good with uptime, does that like are you able to pay into collateral to have more space being used to have like more like say you have a 16 terabyte machine, can you pay to have like 14 out of 16 terabytes like used up, or is that over time?
Yeah, no, we're not there yet. And so where
Okay.
we are is we're still a couple of months away from actually being out there with a public name and a pretty website
Yep.
and the sales process to be out there repping and selling storage to customers. When
Hmm.
that all sort of transpires and we do start onboarding customers, then it's going to be an interesting situation. And the reason why I say interesting situation is because right now, as I said, there's 2,800 hosts on the network, and there's about another 1,000 or 900 or whatever examiners coming online very shortly. So,
Yeah.
we'll have 3 to 4,000 providers on the network in the next, month or whatever. And the deal is that they're mostly concentrated in Europe and the USA,
Hmm.
but there's some in places like South Africa and, some Asian countries and, Russia even and a few places and so forth. And it depends on where we get a customer, right? So like
Okay.
if we get a customer in, Silicon Valley, for instance, and it turns out that they want to have a lot of very performant, storage that's close by, they may choose all Californian hosts, right? Or they may
Yeah.
choose that Northwest sort of region kind of scenario.
Hmm.
And then so here you are, maybe down in Tuscaloosa or something, and you're not going to be actually seeing any of that data. So that's kind of how that's going to work, and it's going to be a dice throw a lot of times because it's going to depend on where our salespeople or where our storage partners find customers as to how much data you get. Now, one of the things that I'm going to say, and I reiterate, and I think maybe people keep hearing this, but it takes a few times before they really get it inside their guts. Um, we're really trying to limit the network right now, right?
Yeah.
We're really trying to keep the numbers down a little bit because if it was 20,000 hosts out there right now, then that question would just be really absurd because it'd be like I'd have to tell you the truth, which is, well, you know what? You're probably not going to get much data at all for the next year,
Yeah.
unless somebody right next door to you happens to have a big company that needs a lot of backup storage, and you
Hmm.
happen to be right in the neighborhood. So no, that is not really how it works. You don't really pay to
Okay.
to get more. But what we expect to happen, we expect to develop and really focus hard on these partners, and we expect to go out and really bang on every region that we think there is value and that we have providers, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately stand up what are essentially sales reps in your neighborhood so that ultimately somebody's out there working on your behalf. And if they aren't out there, as I said, you can stand up as a sales rep, right? You can become an MSP or a referral agent and turn on your family and friends and people that you know that run companies who need backup and archival services and then generate your own storage, right?
Interesting. I did hear something about that, but it's good to hear that reiteration. Thank you so much for the question opportunity.
Sure, no problem. Okay, well, it looks like tonight we're not going to get a whole bunch of Q&As, so this is probably going to be the new thing. Oh, here comes some questions. So I knew that was going to happen, by the way. But I want to just say before I take these questions that This is how we're probably going to do these things going forward. I'm going to start to focus them more on other people and bring in guests to come and talk. And I'll probably over the next couple of them start tapping some of you folks out there in the community to come up and talk and provide that slice of life from the provider perspective. And look, I'll let you say everything you want to say. And if you want to rep the DIY side, for instance, we'll go ahead and we'll do that. Perhaps even next week we'll make the storage provider meetup, since that's actually the title of the session. But Bird Up, come to the stage and ask your question. Bird Up. All right, I'm gonna go next guy. Q Star. Gotta come to the stage. Just right click yourself and come to the stage. Okay.
Hello.
Here we go. All right, go ahead, Bird Up.
Hi. So I am also a DIYer, and I was really wondering, as you said, you were trying to keep the numbers down. And I wasn't here for the entire thing, but I was just wondering, what do you plan on doing in terms of DIY moving forward? Is it a long-term thing to stay DIY, or would you say it would be better for us to move over to the system that you guys are making?
I mean, personally, and this is only going to be an opinion because we've not made any concrete decisions yet on exactly how it's going to play out. But we are trying to mirror helium in some ways, and I think what you're going to find is you're going to find a really strong focus by us on a consistent platform, and that platform will drive the operating system and UI that we build, whether it's us licensing that to somebody else or whatever, and so forth. I know that we've said that DIY will always be a part of the project, and I suspect it probably always will. But look, there's going to come a point in time where one thing proves out or another thing proves out, and we're not going to try and jam a square peg into a round hole. If it turns out that DIY is the cost effective, most productive way to do this, then that'll be the way we'll go. We don't think that's what's going to happen based on all that stuff I said earlier, but we'll give it certainly a fair hearing and so forth. And I'm pretty sure that we will still consider DIY. Now, let me just say this. DIY can't go away. I mean, it literally cannot go away. The blockchain is in place. The contract renter host protocol is in place. Even if we continued to upgrade SPD ourselves and never released it into an open source world, you could still continue to use the version you're using right now. And others could build software to rent storage from your device outside of our thing altogether, right? So again, we could go off and do our own thing in our own way, and you could stay on DIY and still make a lot of money, even not even being related to us anymore, right? Just building the network and having other people rent storage from you. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but I do know that it's a permissionless network, and so I can't throw you off. I just, if I decide I don't want to pay you my money, then I can do that. And that's all we're really talking about. We're not talking about throwing you off because we don't have the power to do that.
And just a follow-up question to that, to your product, the XA miner, right? Is there any configurability with that? So let's say, instance, I want to get like the 20 terabyte Seagates and put those in there. Is that compatible with your XA miners?
Well, I think you got to understand kind of how the whole Examiner thing works. The infrastructure, the ecosystem, I guess, is the better description. What happens is we put these devices out there, and yeah, they sell at this weird MSRP that's really expensive, and typically people look at this and say, why? I'm not going to do that. I can buy and build it myself for a lot less. But then we rebate it. And how do we rebate it? We rebate it back to you from, this network development fund. And then that allows us to turn that network development fund into network development, right? We
Mhm.
pay coders, and they actually write the software that develops the network and keeps it all in order and so forth. So when you ask about configurability, well, one of the ways that we are able to make that work is we sell these configurations as is. If I just sold you this rig for, $400 as a, NAS, and then let you go put in all your own drives, there's not a lot of profitability in that for me. I might, make $50 or something like that. And at some point in the future, that might be enough, right? Because if we sell 18,000 of them, that might be
Mhm.
enough, right? So I think that day is coming, but it's probably not coming in 2022. In 2022, you buy a unit, you have to stand it up for 1 year, and then you get the rebate. So that's kind of the deal. If you try and change the drives out, then you don't get the rebate, and that's purposeful in order to essentially make sure that they stay the same. All right, let me take another question from another guy. Thanks. Q-Star. Whoops. Q-Star, come back. I screwed you up, man. I apologize. I knocked you off. Where are you? Come back into the thing and I'll bring you right back up. Oh, there you are. I got you. Invite you to speak. No, he doesn't want to come back. Is he mad at me? No, here he is. Go ahead.
I'm back.
I apologize. Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Great. English is not my first language, so I'm sorry if you guys can kind of understand my accent. So, firstly, I wanted to ask you, when you say DIY, do you specifically target the guys with the Raspberry Pi, or because I'm running a proper server, even though it's DIY, I think it's more performant than an XA in my opinion.
DIY is anything that anybody builds, and we're not talking about performance. I'm not even arguing that you guys aren't going to build more performant rigs than what the Examiner is. Examiner is not performant at all. It's a Celeron 4900 Coffee Lake series. It's 2 gens old and probably could barely run any of modern games. It's got 8 gigs of DDR4 and it's not even very fast memory. Look, Examiners are not performant machines. That's not the idea. The idea is the software that runs on them has certain kinds of capabilities and consistencies to it that we're going to be able to turn around and leverage in terms of how we approach our customers. And like I said, one of those key ways, for instance, is if I can take one of those boxes and hand it to an auditor and say, look, here's our box. This is the auditability software that we've put onto the box to verify that the user cannot change anything. And if you sign off on this box, we can guarantee that every bit of data that is stored under your compliance regime is going to fit on this box only and not anything else. And we'll probably get signed off on a lot of different compliance regimes. If I had to go there and say, well, I've got this shambolic network of 82 different configurations. One guy's running Windows Server 16 over here, another guy's Ubuntu. This guy over here's got a Pi set up, and and you guys are all over the place. Some of you are willing to run some software for audits. Some of you are saying, no, I want to be a non, I'm not getting past on any compliance audits there. I'm just not getting past it. And then what happens? I can't store data for all different kinds of industries. So performance is really just a piece of this puzzle. And by the way, it's not even a big piece, because here's the thing. We just talked about what we're seeing right now on our relayer. And why is that so important that our relayer is as performant as it is? And why is our relayer so performant? It's because we've super optimized the parallelism. The big factor that's there now that wasn't there before is workers, and this ability to tweak and tune really granularly the amount of workers that we're throwing against the amount of processor cores and so forth. And what I mean by that is, if I have a 10G connection and I'm saturating it, I'm not saturating your connection, right? Your connection is just getting a tiny little workout. You're getting one sliver of that 82 shards that we're sending up to the network, right? You're not getting all that much from me. So your performance doesn't really mean all that much. The performance is the relayer, right? Now, durability means a lot, and availability means a lot, and the ability to stand up good capacity that's always there. That's going to mean an awful lot. I don't want this to come away. I know how the session sounded, and I know that everybody's going to think, okay, well, Faust finally did it. He said DIY is done. He hates us all, so we need to go to Fort Collins and kill him. I mean, don't do that, please. But the deal is we we do think you guys are going to build performant rigs. We do think you're going to build available rigs, and we're going to use them. We will use them. We're just saying that at the end of the day, the examiners have characteristics on this network for the product we're building that are superior, and that's just not going to change.
That's great. And if I can ask another question, it's a total different thing. It's about the reseller opportunity that you just spoke earlier.
Yes.
Is that going to be something available for everyone, or is it going to be just like a like application process or something to become a reseller of the end product?
Chaz, do you want to take this? I don't know if Chaz is still here. He might be in his kitchen making sandwiches.
No, I'm here.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, just repeat the question. I heard
He's just asked if the reseller opportunity would be open to everyone.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. The reseller opportunity is meant for, hey, I've got some leads. I know some people. I'm going to fork them over to the team, and the team's going to pay me a commission. So that is like the easiest entry point for anybody on this phone call, because all you're doing is you're referring business to the firm, and we're billing them, we're charging them, and you're just getting a commission for bringing the business to the front door. So yeah, that's available to everybody, and that's not going anywhere. The MSP is going to take a little more.
Doing that, just here on Discord, you say I got a client, or is there going to be some kind of application form, email?
Yeah, we'll have a registration process, and we'll have all of that stuff up and running so that those customers get tagged to you and all of that. Absolutely. The MSP, on the other hand, we'll be selling to you at quote unquote wholesale, and you're going to have to bill your customers. You're going to have to get the storage readings. Like, it's going to be a lot more heavy lifting. You're also going to be first level support too. So, the MSP is a lot more of a commitment than a referral agent. So yeah, it's available to everyone. It's very easy to do. We'll have a whole mechanism to track it, and you'll just get paid. For referral business. Very, very easy, very straightforward.
Also understand in this process that we have
information somewhere about the MSP especially.
Yeah, well, we're going to build the website here very shortly, and all that information will be available. But one of the things to understand is, like I said, like my background, I have a lot of background in reseller work and distribution and so forth. And so, there's a lot of things that are going to come up along the way, right? Like, you might go out and find a big customer, a big business who has this, deal that they want to pass. And I'll use an example that's a lot bigger than anybody here is going to get. But, when the Department of Defense bid out this giant network, Amazon came along and actually bid for it, and then I think Azure got awarded the contract, and Amazon's suing now so it was a bid process. And so we'll set up things like deal registration, right? So if you come to us and you actually have a quote or a bid out for a customer, and then we get another reseller that shows up with the same bid for the customer, so we know how to handle that sort of stuff. So that reseller opportunity, I think, is really going to become an exciting part of this puzzle. And ultimately, I think you guys can make a lot of money at it. So really appreciate the question. Thanks. Howling Hells.
Hey y'all. Hope y'all are doing well. So I had a quick question, and I know I'm fairly new to really all this as well. But this project's really cool to me, especially that we're kind of all in the early stages, well, early people, I would say, the early hosts. Is there any opportunities in the future, what on more involvement, something that we can help out as a community, or we might be able to task out something we can just help improve whatever you need? Is there any opportunities that you're thinking in the future right now, or yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, so this is an awesome question, because one of the things that I identified to the team just in our recent staff meeting was, back in the day when we had 1,400 members for a long time, I identified to them that, probably 700 of the 1,400 were actually haters, people that didn't like us, that were just here from Saya to watch us fail, right? So our community was probably even smaller than we thought it was for those first 2 years. But now all of a sudden, we've got this 10,000 member community. And what we saw almost immediately as it came together is people were starting to write these third-party applications, and so I immediately set up a channel for them, and we're starting to see some really wonderful work come out of them, and I think that's just going to improve over time. And so when I see that, I immediately start DMing and chatting those people up and saying, look, there's some opportunity. We have a bunch of people on our who we call contractors who are doing little bits and pieces, and then we just work on a individual project basis, or we work on a module, or we have them work a part-time kind of a deal, and they slot in what works best for them, providing the kinds of capabilities that they do best that we happen to need. So if you think you have some skill sets that we might need, definitely you should talk to us and let us know, because we definitely have some needs right now. We're about ready to build a web page with all this stuff out there, but we're looking right now mostly for coders still. We still need a back end senior, maybe two. We know we need a really, really good front end to bookend with our already really good front ender. We want to put in a QA person right now. We're going to need a tech support person for the whole Examiner program, so that's an opportunity. There's just a whole bunch of things that are basically available right now, and then there's just side projects that people are working on, and yeah, so we'll definitely pay for them. So thanks for that question. Ball in a cup. And you can ask the guys on the panel too, if your question's for them. But go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I know you've said in the past that when the new shipment gets shipped, it gets shipped. But I didn't know maybe if you had a small update on the miners.
Well, you should have got an email today, and that will have more information. And then in the announcements, you can click the link for the status. And now the status actually tells you about how far away you are from getting your shipment in terms of number of units that are still in front of you and which unit of the batch we're currently on. And some people in the batches are probably going to come away pretty sad when they see. Some are going to be pretty happy. The furthest out, the people that ordered at the very end, yeah, they're going to be there. I do want to just chat about that real briefly, and I'm just going to say this, and it's not a formal announcement again, but it will ultimately probably become one. When you get into this kind of situation where you have a bunch of people that pre-ordered, even though we made it very clear that this was a pre-order, we were going to take all this money, because we were not getting 1,100 orders over 3 weeks. We were getting 6 to 8 orders per week, and we didn't have any money, right? All our money goes to our coders. So, it's not like I can go to China and buy, 1,000 motherboards and then just set them on a shelf and wait for people to buy the rigs. We just weren't there. That's not where we were. So we had to take pre-orders. We took the pre-orders and we sent money to China. We sent money to Taiwan. We sent money all over the place to Seagate. We sent it to all these people. So now there's people that are saying, well, geez, I didn't know it was going to take 4 weeks and I want a refund, and it's like I'm sitting there saying to you, asking for a refund right now is the stupidest thing I've ever fucking heard. You guys are going to make so much money off these things. You're not even thinking clearly. But same time, that's the world we live in. And so, it's coming through. So then I have to tell them, well, there are no refunds. And we said that very clearly as well. But what may end up ultimately happening here, by the way, is we may get to a place where the orders start cranking up really rapidly. And then, in another 2 weeks, we only have a few hundred systems left to do, I may actually go ahead and take some of those longer people out there that have been sort of crying the hardest, and I may let them loose. I may turn them loose and say, yeah, you want the refund, go ahead, and then turn that over to some of these people that have been just screaming to get into the process, because there's 3,000 people on a wait list, and I know at least 400 that would just give us money right now and say, I don't care when I get the system. I just want to be in the deal flow. Get me in there. I just don't want to get into this mode where I'm turning the entire order book upside down and sending crypto back to a bunch of people so that I can then turn the order book into a bunch of new people. But go to that website, check your order number. You'll see exactly how many orders are between you and when you're going to get shipped. It's not going to tell you a date, but at least it'll give you some idea how many units have to go by, and you can watch it over the next week or two and see what happens. Cool. I guess cool. LJ. I'm going to start double clicking on you guys because we're going to only got about 15 minutes left. Black Dragon. Oh, Algae's coming to the stage. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Hi.
From Middle East. I was just curious on one question. On the DIY side, if I've got one in three different locations, one in Europe, one in Middle East, and one in Malaysia. I'm on the wait list for Examiner. Happy to invest in it. I think it's a great project. But I was just wondering if once we get on that list and we've got our items, would we be able to transfer what we've already done on our DIY rigs to that system?
Well, there is some ability to move instances from unit to unit, but moving them to an Examiner is probably going to be a bit of a trick. I'm not going to answer yes or no on that. I will do this. Is that possible, Jay? I don't even know if Jay's still listening, but
Sorry, I only caught the end of that question.
the thing is if we're a DIYer and we're on the wait list and we get 6 months in and we have a lot of storage on our DIY and we want to transfer everything over to the Examiner instance, is that possible? I mean, could we do that? Is there some way we could do that?
It is possible. I can think of one way it would work already. With the software, you can restore a host from USB. So we could probably provide documentation for that to work already with what's there. We didn't really build it with that use case.
Yeah, it's an edge case, but something
it would work.
Yeah.
That would work, yeah. It's
Okay.
possible. I don't really know. There might be other considerations that I can't think of.
Yeah. No commitment on this right now, but it's possible, LJ, we might be able to do that for you. And look, the one thing that I would say is if you're somebody that has 3 DIYs and then you also invested in the Examiner, that means you helped us out. You put some money into development of the project and so forth. So, if we can gang your units together and show them as a group and we show them as under one flag, we're going to be able to do some things with incentives to say, well, look, let's bless that guy. Let's, if we take care of his Examiner, we'll also shed some data out to his DIYers in a little bit more prolific way than we might normally do, and do that. And we've talked about this also in that DIYers that are here today that stick around and have a long continuous time in service will also be favored. So it's quite possible that a DIYer that hits certain milestones, by the time they get past 12 months in, they wind up have they're not deprecated to XMs at all because they've passed enough milestones that essentially we consider them to be one of the family, right? We've jumped you in and you're part of us. You're one of us. So even though you're not an Examiner. So there's a lot of ways that we can take care of DIYers. We love DIYers that buy Examiners too, because ultimately paying coders is just a thing. I mean, you just have to do it. So thanks for the questions. Black Dragon.
What's the security of the node and the program like? Like I understand the data is encrypted. What's the security like for the node?
Yeah, so what ends up happening on the end nodes themselves, so with Reed Solomon erasure coding, piece of data gets, sharded off into however many slivers. So any individual provider starts off by never getting one full piece of data. They never get a whole file, for instance. Well, they could get a whole file if it fitted into a tiny shard, but they get a shard of a data set. Okay. So that's the beginning. So if there was some way for them to actually get into that shard, they would not have the ability to recreate the whole thing. So it's that. But then on top of that, the shard is actually encrypted with NSA grade encryption. It's XCHA 2020 and very robust. So the story is you can't do anything. I mean, if you can get in and mess with a file, right? You can tear the file apart, but at the end of the day, all you're doing is destroying your ability to deliver a storage proof. You're not going to actually be able to access the data. And we're going to have to do some white papering on this and case studying on this, because this question is going to come from our customers. They're going to say, wait, some guy eating cereal in his pajamas is hosting my storage and you're telling me it's more secure than Amazon? How am I supposed to believe that? And the truth of the matter is, it is. It's just more secure. First of all, there's just no way they can break the encryption. And second of all, they don't have access to the whole data. And then if we go even further and do auditability, right, where we actually show very clearly that the machine is tamper-proof and hasn't been tampered with, and we'll pay you more for that capability, we can go even one step further. So that's that. Now, then there's another layer of that you might be addressing, which is sort of the legalistic aspect of it. So, what's to prevent somebody from uploading something illegal onto your system and then the cops busting down your door and saying, oh my God, he's an anarchist, he's got all this crazy stuff. Well, first of all, the way that works is when the authorities find out that that exists, it's because somebody shared a public link through the S3 interface. What would happen is that the authorities would then find their way back to the customer, the business, and then they would actually, if they really went all the way with it, forensically dig into the relayer and find out where the shards live out there on the network. And if they identified the 82 different sharded providers, then what would happen is they would say, well, look, this stuff's got to get taken down. Well, they're not going to come out and tell you to take it down because you don't have any ability to take it down, right? You can't do anything with it. So it's on that business, and that business signs a very rigid terms of service with us. And so if the law enforcement community shows up and says, look, you got these yokels out here running a company, but on the side, they're hosting a whole bunch of pirated movies and shipping them out on your network. What the heck? And that's a clear violation of our terms of service. We'll warn the company. And if the company doesn't take the stuff down immediately, we'll kick the company off the network. And then that's how you're protected, because essentially we are the ones responsible for taking the violators off the network. So you don't have that. So good question. Thanks.
That is great information, but that's not quite what the question was. I was asking security of the node. So my node recently had a few files mysteriously deleted from it. And I mean, I replaced the files and it's back up and running and whatnot. But what is if somebody were to try to attack the network and delete those files from all the nodes and start taking the nodes down? What can be done to prevent that?
Well, I mean, that's on you. I mean, there's nothing in our software that allows people to access or ingress into your system in any kind of way to be able to delete files, for instance, or to delete, parts of your software and so forth. There certainly exists the ability to DDoS us. I mean, that's never going to change. That's everybody. They can DDoS Amazon. There are some things, again, like with the Examiner that we've identified, DDoS is less successful against an IP announced host versus a DDNS type announced host, like a name, because what ends up happening on a name is a name will transition even to the same, even if you change the IP underneath it. So if a DDoS is happening, you don't really have an out. Your network is just going to get frozen and clogged up and locked. Whereas if you have an IP address announced host, what happens is you can call your ISP and ask them to change the IP address, and all of a sudden the attack stops. So that's another feature of the Examiner, by the way, that a lot of you people, for convenience, have leaned on somebody like DuckDNS, but ultimately you're going to find out that that's going to turn into being a liability. But as far as protecting your node, I mean, you're going to have to put AV on there. You're going to have to put, typical stuff to protect it from people being able to get into it. But our software doesn't open any specific doors unless you actually forwarded, a port that you didn't need to forward.
4280.
4280 would be a bad port to open, yes.
All right, thank you.
Amanda Madi, I think.
Hey, yes, that's me.
How you doing?
I was wondering about with like auditability and getting like certified for HIPAA and things like that. Is that something that you guys plan to sort of present to us as an ability later on down the pipeline when you start thinking about taking customers like that? Or is that something that we can do preemptively so that you guys can then have the ability to say, we have these people that are certified on our network if you need to store like medical data or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect understanding of how this Examiner program is going to turn out. What'll end up we're on version .8, right? We haven't really had a full release yet of this software. It works pretty good today. And so the deal is when we get to version 1 and start really rolling up the next feature roadmap of where we're headed, that's part of it. All of that auditability capability, the tools for that, and then also even the stuff we're going to be doing behind the scenes with audit regimes, maybe even using equipment that we have that we can then turn around and say this is identical to the units they have, and then you'll have the ability to log into a portal and then choose which regimes you might want to satisfy and how far you're willing to go. Are you willing to dox yourself? Are you willing to, do certain kinds of things? Are you willing even to put up more collateral, for instance, or something like that? There's all kinds of things we'll be able to make and expose as options, and they'll just throw up in your console, right? They'll just show up right there on your unit, and you'll be able to go ahead and pick and choose and click links and take you off to where you need to go, and then ultimately, in sort of a buffet style, choose how much you want to earn.
Nice. That's cool. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks. DJ Zero.
I've got two questions. The first one was on the back of that security question. I've tried using Cloudflare as a DNS provider to announce my DNS or my IP, but it doesn't let me do it because Cloudflare gives you more than 2 IP addresses, and when you try and announce something with more than 2 IP addresses, it doesn't let you announce it. So I wanted to use Cloudflare to hide my public IP address and also prevent a defense against DDoS. So Cloudflare is really good at that. But as a result, I can't actually do that. So I've had to revert back to using DuckDNS where it does expose your public IP address. Is there any way to sort of, are you guys aware of that issue with Cloudflare or similar issues with other DNS providers?
I'll open that up to either Jay or Henry if they want to take it. And then when they're done, I'll just address one other thing about Cloudflare. Still there, Jay?
Yeah, I'm here. We haven't done much testing through Cloudflare. Also, it's against their terms of service to put any of our traffic over their network. So, I mean, you can use them for DNS, non-proxy, but as soon as you enable proxying through Cloudflare, I mean, I think it would probably work, but technically, it'd be breaking their rules, and at some point, it'd probably stop.
And I'll go further on that and say, this is something I've never really said in public before. Wasabi is not going to be our #1 competitor. Cloudflare is, I think. And time will tell if that turns out to be true. But Cloudflare wants AWS business. And they are as distributed as we intend to be. And so ultimately, I think we're going to run right smack into those people. So I think they're going to start to do more and more to discourage the kind of stuff that you're talking about, which means that, yeah, DDoS are going to be a fact of life for us, and exposing uh, IP addresses on a P2P network, look, kind of a fact of the existence. So I think it's an area that we do have to put some real energy into over the next year. We'll probably be looking to hire some security engineers and some people to really dig into that. I have to just tell you right now, it's the kind of thing where just having advertised an IP address is your main defense, because what you end up doing is calling your ISP and saying, or shutting down your modem and just turning it on if it gets an automatic new IP address. But changing your IP address is the way to mitigate a DDoS attack on our network today.
Okay. The other question was around nodes. So at the moment, I've just got one node, and all my storage is allocated there across two folders. What I noticed is the data trickles in. So you're not getting big wads of data at a time. It trickles in, and it goes across those two folders. It alternates between them. So am I more beneficial setting up more nodes? So other nodes, and splitting the storage across nodes rather than folders? Because I'm imagining that if it's trickling into one node, like at a consistent, slow sort of trickle rate, that you could amplify it by creating more nodes so that you've got more data coming in, because now you've got several nodes set up as opposed to having one node with massive storage space just on the one node. Is there any sort of comments you'd like to make around that? Is there a preference? There's probably benefits to the provider versus benefits to SE Prime.
Yeah, you've actually exposed a couple of things. And so the first one that I would say is there is some benefit to additional nodes up to a point. If it turns out that the farm grows so big and you're, exposing like 22 nodes, then it becomes a real centralization issue. And we're definitely not going to be wanting the relayer to throw too many shards, because, your house burns down or your building burns down or whatever, and we take down, 32 shards out of a, 40, redundancy erasure code set. That's not going to be a great thing. So there's a point where it will make some sense, a couple of nodes. But you've also exposed a problem that we've identified with the renter host protocol. And it's one that we kind of scratched our heads that we had not identified much before, but it is a problem, and we do know that we need to address it, and we do know that we are going to be looking at remediating it sometime over the next, probably before we get to Vegas, but sometime over the next quarter or two. And that is that when you have multiple drives, folders, on your system, and data is flowing in, it's actually going off to them all equally. And that's a problem, because it's essentially turning them into a big striped RAID, which is not what we want, because essentially one unit goes down, you end up possibly losing the entire contract. And we haven't really tested that out in production at this point to determine how bad the problem actually is. But we know it's bad enough that we're going to have to address it, and address it pretty quickly. So when we do that, we probably are going to look into this drive zeroing issue that we have on Windows providers as well. So, but it is a thing, and I think you're right. I think a couple of nodes makes a ton of sense. I think, everybody having a couple of nodes is probably a good idea. Once you start getting past 3, I would say you're really opening up a farm. Once you open up a farm, you're probably not going to gain a lot of extra data unless we start fire hosing data from, dozens of clients. And then it doesn't matter. Then you're getting, you can get multiple clients into one unit, and, you're fine. It's only when you have one client, one relayer, that's actually sending data out, and they're not going to fill up all of your, your drives. And if you have more than 3 nodes or so forth, they're not going to fill that up. Thanks for the questions. Alex, last question. Alj, you don't get a second question. Or you already had 2, actually. Alex.
The question that I had was, I'm currently a DYIer, And I would like to know, when are you guys going to start refilling your website with more XA miners? Because I am interested in, like you said, open up a farm, hopefully having at least 3 miners at a time.
Well, this will probably be next week's call. We'll put in about 15 or 20 minutes on this, but I'm already in this process. So look, one of the problems with the flagship is the 4-drive NAS that we put together, and it's a relatively reasonable chassis. It's okay. It's stylish. It looks good. It's heavy duty. It doesn't, it's not cheap, but it's got some issues. It's Chinese. I mean, it's built in Shenzhen, and you know, they don't have a great rep for doing really high quality stuff. They just bend the metal and they put it out there, put decent paint on it. So at the end of the day, that unit probably still continues to be the flagship going forward, but it requires some real specific stuff. And some of those things are really hard to get right now, like CPUs and motherboards. Specifically, to get ITX motherboards with port SATA ports limits you in population of what you can draw from. Then when you go out and you find them, you find out, well, I can get like 4. I can't get 400. I can't get 4,000. I can get 4. So all of a sudden you start to really see what the problem is there. So one of the things that's likely to happen, and it'll overlap this current batch, is we'll probably roll out some new models. Right. And if we do roll out a new model and somebody's already on the, ordering process and wants to change over to a new model or something like that, we'll certainly make that possible. But when I say new models, what I might be talking about, and this is all again, not formal announcement. I'm just telling you what we're thinking. But so like we saw today in the forum, I've said all along that we want to do a NUC, a small device with either, some sort of multiple NVMe inside it or a single HDD. So a 20 terabyte drive and an Intel NUC. I mean, that would be a pretty cool, rig that wouldn't cost a lot of money and would be, pretty useful to stand up as an appliance. That can be Examiner made capable. We might do something like a Supermicro 1U, right? And because maybe we can go out and get 500 Supermicro 1Us. They're really expensive, but that might be something that a lot of people want if we turn around and say, also, we'll turn these into a staking node somewhere down the line. So they might be worth the extra cost. So the ability to get an Examiner soon may not just be, when are you going to put more 4-drive units up on your website? It may be, when are the new models, or when are, some new capability Examiner coming to the table, or when are you going to license your software to some other integrator that can build Examiners? I don't know. Those are all ways that we skin that cat. As far as when do the new 4-drives show up, to be honest with you, I've been trying to get my chassis vendor to give me a firm commitment. They're all on holiday right now. They're all back home. So, they're all celebrating and won't be back in the office for another several days. When they get back in the office, they'll tell me when they're going to spin up the machines and start bending metal again, and how soon I can get the chassis over here. I suspect that's 30 to maybe 45 days to get another, 2 to 5,000 chassis sent from China. Motherboards, though, are just impossible at that kind of volume. I can go out and find 100 to 200 at a time. So I don't know that we ever get this year in 2022 into a place where the website goes back to, hey, there's inventory, there's stuff in stock. I just think for a while, it's going to be this case where there's going to be more of you than them, right? In that there's more buyers than there is components. And for those of you who are willing to spend the money and then be patient, we're going to take care of you. I mean, in this current version, we moved up the rebates. We priced them at January 1st. We threw you a bonus on top. I mean, I think we've told you we love you. So that's the thing, and people that are willing to wait and be patient on our project are the ones that are going to get rewarded. That word comes up all the time in the community, patience, because if you're patient, you will get rewarded in this project, and ultimately you'll get rewarded big time. So, hey, everybody, thanks for showing up tonight. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the team and our partners or investors who showed up and took the time to answer some questions and talk to you. We'll keep doing more of this. I really think these are great, and I hope they're really helping you guys out. And so, once again, great session, and thank you for coming. Drive carefully.